We're ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the Gateway School District's Budget and Finance Committee meeting via Zoom. Today is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Just would like to say that we should be able to be viewed tonight on YouTube Live, our Zoom meeting, and FiOS channel 44. Not sure about Comcast this evening for anybody who's watching. And we do have some comments to read. And I also want to let everybody know that we will have a live board meeting on the 9th, because it will be after the green date of June 5th. So our next meeting we plan to have in person, and we'll have some more details to announce on how that'll work, but we're probably going to ask for an RSVP for those who will attend, just so we can choose a right venue and adequately social distance. So with that, I would just like to turn the meeting now over to Dr. Short.
Thank you, Mrs. Cerrucci. For the purposes of a roll call, we do have Mrs. Crump here that will ask for attendance. So as I call out your name, or Mrs. Crump will call out your name, take that you're present. Mrs. Cerrucci.
Here.
Mr. Caleri.
Here.
Ms. Delaney.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Gottman.
Here.
Mr. McIntyre.
Here.
Mr. Ritter.
Here.
Ms. Warning. Mrs. Warning. Mr. Williams.
Here.
And we do have from central office, Mrs. Crump, Dr. Short, Dr. Rossi, Dr. Chait, Mrs. Bungard, Mr. Brown. And did I miss anyone else?
Mr. Hall, Coach Hall.
Mr. Hall, we have here.
I was on mute, Micah.
Yeah, Mrs. Warning is here. Okay, we got her. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the next scheduled budget meeting. As we do know, this has been quite a process, which has started theoretically going back to November prior to the COVID-19 shutdown on March 13th. Needless to say, this has probably been the most difficult budget process that I know in my career I've ever been through, and I'm sure everyone else. It's been very fluid. Myself, Paul Schott, Mrs. Crump, everyone has been truly hard at work trying to solve the issues associated with this, and it really comes down to revenue. As we've always done in previous years with transparency, we've been able to list a number of slides associated with the upcoming fiscal year and the budget proposal. Paul Schott, our business manager, does have some summary information related to the last several weeks, and he would like to begin the presentation tonight with those slides. Also, we do have some slides from Mrs. Crump that she will also show, and then we ask for everyone's patience as we move through this process, and then of course we could open it up for questions from the board and our viewing public. So with that, Mr. Schott, are you with us?
I am here and ready to go.
Okay, we'll turn it over to you at this point.
All right, great. Thank you, Dr. Short. Before we move into the budget presentation, one of the items that we like to address every year, actually we're required to address every year, is our continuing disclosure for bond issuer compliance with Rule 15C2-12 in relation to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and that is in relation to the district's outstanding bonds receivable that are outstanding. And just as some summary information, again, all outstanding bond issues require the district to make several disclosures of information prior to December 31st of each calendar year. Currently, the district has 3 outstanding bond issues: series of 2012, the amount of $2,540,000. That's set to mature and final payment on October 15th of 2022. That was just recently partially refinanced. We also have the series of 2016 general obligation bonds, outstanding bonds in the amount of $16,485,000. Final payment on July 15th of 2027, and the series of 2020 general obligation bonds in the amount of $23,365,000. Total outstanding bond principal of $42,390,000. Total outstanding interest on bonds, $6,914,287, for a grand total of all district bond debt outstanding and payable of $49,304,287. So just a rundown in terms of what specific is outstanding. Some of the information that we have to disclose on an annual basis is the district audited financial statements, and also some various pieces of operating data that are also compiled on an annual basis and disclosed. We also make some voluntary disclosures throughout the year, specifically our budget. So for instance, this budget we're working on, the corresponding budget document, once it's finally approved in July, we will also disclose this information to any stakeholders and or bondholders out there for their review, as well as our AFR, which stands for our annual financial report, which is completed at the end of October. That statement will also be released as an interim document prior to the release of the formal audit report. In terms of bond continuing disclosure assistance, the district has utilized Digital Assurance Certification, or DAC. Can't say enough for them. They've been an excellent continuing disclosure partner for the district. They've helped me considerably over the years. They do monitor the district for any bond rating changes, and disclosures to the SEC are made on behalf of the district. And they also do provide me with required CPE training opportunities as well. In terms of continuing disclosure activities, previously we've adopted policies and procedures. The filing of required reports and other operating data, I can report that we are currently up to date and filed on time with all requirements. Notifications of material events in a timely manner to the SEC is obviously a very big issue, and we've been able to meet all those as we've been able to move forward. And then just some examples of any other material events that need to be disclosed, and there's an entire list of them. I just grabbed a couple of them from the list. Any debt service delinquencies, bankruptcy, or again, as I mentioned previously, any bond rating changes. And again, we haven't had any of those types of events recently that we've been required to disclose. And also have to mention, in terms of the COVID-19 disclosures of applicable information, that's continuing as we move forward to see exactly what types of disclosures we may have to make and or possibly add to the district's notes to financial statements, for instance, for the current operating year. So that's another stay tuned item. But again, DAC has been sending out different pieces of information to me as well. And I have had some initial discussions with our local auditors as well. So again, that's another area we'll see what is appropriate to disclose in regards to those items as we move forward. All right, with that, I want to move to our next slide. And again, as was mentioned, the meeting this evening serves as our formal final public hearing that is required by PD and school code. And again, this is our proposed final budget information as of today's date. So again, in terms of a summary of our proposed final total revenues, and from the last time we met, they have changed. Our projected proposed final total revenues currently amount to $74,082,000. Note that revenue amount does not include a real estate tax increase for 2021. That number represents a decrease of $3,187,000, or 4.12% under the fiscal year 1920 budgeted total revenues. In terms of proposed final total expenditures, currently the amount is at $75,376,000. That represents a decrease of $1,893,000, or 2.45% under the fiscal year 1920 budget expenditures. So when you take those two numbers, the decrease in revenues and the decrease in expenditures, they result in a net proposed final budget shortfall or deficit for 2021 of $1,294,000 to be bounced through either the utilization of a combination of unassigned fund balance and or a full or partial real estate tax millage increase. And again, the question mark there, that's still to be determined, but to be discussed. So again, just in terms of what is that actual reduction to actually see that in our 2021 budget deficit. Again, our previous meeting on May 21st, the deficit was at $3,578,000. At our meeting this evening is currently at $1,294,000. So the deficit decrease was 64% or $2,284,000. Please note that that decrease is primarily a result of the utilization of option 1 and option 2 curtailment of programs and staff reductions that were previously reviewed at the May 21st meeting. And again, the COVID-19 pandemic, wanted to note a couple items. Again, the unknown magnitude of decrease in the collection rates associated with all local tax revenues, both current and delinquent taxes, and also the level funding of the basic education and the special education state subsidies. Governor Wolf signed late last week the state budget. Fortunately, we have been level funded for basic education and special education, but just one item to note that if the district would have possibly received an extra $251,548 of combined state subsidy that was originally proposed by Governor Wolf in his budget address back in February 2020, obviously over a month prior to what developed in terms of the shutdown beginning on March 14th. But mainly just wanted to stress that decreasing or level funded revenues while expenditures are increasing makes it a nearly impossible task to try to balance the general fund budget. And again, that's what we've been up against the last several months and in trying to balance this budget. And again, is some takeaway information from the previous meeting and the very large PowerPoint presentation. We selected some slides out of that, just in terms of the current index, what the equivalent of mills is, and again that just represents the amount that the district is permitted to raise a millage rate by for the 2021 fiscal year. And again, for the current 1920 fiscal year, the district is the 14th lowest millage rate out of 42 school districts in Allegheny County. And whether we maintain 14th lowest or not for 2021, we will not know that until probably sometime in July. And again, just some more comparison of information in regards to current millage, what a maximum millage would look like, what that means. Most important thing is just a full increase of 3% would yield a net amount of approximately $1.3 million. And again, just to highlight the sheet we talked about even the last meeting, you look at the yellow highlighted areas for the last 6 fiscal years. The district has only raised taxes 2 times out of the last 6 fiscal years, and that's going back to the 14-15 fiscal year all the way through the current 19-20 fiscal year. And again, just some more information in terms of millage, what it means in terms of the median taxable value in relation to 3% index, and Monroeville for a median taxable value of $108,700. At a 3% index, that would equate to $64.79 per year. And looking at further as a breakdown per month, that would be an additional $5.40 per month. Likewise, in the borough of Pitcairn, based on a median taxable value of $34,600, a 3% index equates to $20.62 per year. And breaking that further down per month is $1.72 per month. Homestead exclusion. Again, most important thing I want to reference on this, and I brought this up last time, there was kind of a breaking news item on Thursday, was that a new certification was made by the state on Tuesday, May 19th, which initially resulted in a 55% reduction from the 2021 fiscal year's allocation amount. However, the state utilized federal stimulus funds to supplement the property tax relief fund to maintain the original district allocation amount for the 2021 fiscal year. We did receive verification of that the amount as noted above did not change and stayed the same. Fortunately, the state was able to utilize those funds and make that allocation whole for the 2021 fiscal year. As far as the 21-22 fiscal year, that remains to be determined. Obviously, the casinos have been shut down and are still shut down, and we'll just have to see exactly what that impact will be in terms of the applicable gaming funds that are available for potential distribution. And again, in terms of homestead exclusion, the district has a total of 7,986 qualified homesteads eligible to receive the homestead exclusion. Of that amount, 7,447 are in Monroeville, 512 are in Pitcairn, and the exclusion amount in terms of a dollar reduction for each is $183.10. Composition of projected ending fund balance, again, just starting with where it's estimated. And again, a lot of things will still come into play that will affect that amount, but just showing it as we had estimated and projected it at approximately $8,380,766. Taking that relation to the next year's budget of $75,376,000, that would be at approximately 11.12%. Again, total fund balance is recommended to be between 5 and 15%. So in terms of projection of total fund balance at next year, at next June 30th of 2021, with no tax increase factored in, again, taking the amount projected, the 8.3 million, less fund balance required to balance, assuming it is all taken from fund balance of the $1,294,000. That would leave a projected total fund balance amount of just over $7 million, and that would amount to 9.4%. And again, in terms of that $1,294,000, that could be more, that could be less. We just don't know, again, as I referred to on the previous slide, in terms of the local tax revenues and exactly what those collections will look like. But just to show in terms of that deficit where it currently sits in relation to fund balance, taking it entirely out of fund balance and the resulting effect of that utilization. On the next slide, we show basically taking that amount and using the full 3% tax increase. It would actually enable us to not take a dollar out of fund balance, and we would maintain whatever the ending balance would be at the end of the current fiscal year. And again, at the estimated amount of $8.3 million at the 11.12%. And again, between the total recommended of between 5 and 15%. And as I've previously stated, Moody's Investor Services, ideally, as always mentions in their reports, U.S. median for total fund balance is 22%, or in our case, would be calculated out at about approximately $16.5 million, which, as I've stated before, in my opinion, is entirely too high. And again, in terms of budget process, just stating where we've been over the process. Again, the documents previously released are still available on the district's website in their previous format. But again, the main thing is that the pre-Act 1 budget timeline will continue to be followed by the district through final budget adoption by the board, which is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. Again, we set that late. We weren't sure at the time exactly when the state would have its budget. We know now that state has its budget, and we've been able to adjust some of our numbers based on how the state was able to structure their budget. The biggest items we're waiting for from the state level, there is a House bill, I believe, the 2460, that is on the House floor that we're waiting to see exactly what the House is going to do with that bill, if anything. But that will have an impact potentially on our real estate tax collection efforts for next year. So again, we're kind of in a stay tuned mode to see what happens. The House and the legislature is supposed to be back in session next week. And we're hopeful that that issue, that bill will be addressed, and we'll know exactly where we stand for 2021. Indeed, if it's going to be moved forward in some manner, or if it's not going to be moved forward, we'll know exactly how to prepare our real estate tax bills accordingly for that. And with that, that's actually my last slide on that presentation.
before we get to, Mrs. Crump and her slide presentation, I think it's important to explain to our constituents or our taxpayers, staff who may be viewing tonight, that the Gateway School District is in a very good position financially at this point. Through the hard work and dedication of all of the employees, central office, business manager, Mr. Schott, Mrs. Crump, before her, Mr. Rieger, whenever we had a retirement and this aligned itself with a decrease in enrollment, we were able to capture positions through attrition. And in looking at our total teaching staff, if you go back 10 or 15 years, it was probably nearing 400 staff members. Currently, right now, we're sitting at, and I know Mrs. Crump is with me right here, roughly 273 teachers. And with that, we've also made administrative cuts over the years. We have always had traditionally 3 superintendents. They've all had administrative assistants. Currently, right now, we have 1 administrative assistant for the 3 superintendents in this office. The special education department had at one time 3 individuals overseeing that department. Currently, they're now down to 2. We had a communications director within the past several years that has moved on. We dissolved the position. We've also had a individual that was responsible for data and planning. That person has left and we dissolved the position. So across the board, I need to inform the public that, this district has been making those tough decisions, capturing through attrition to get to the point where we do have a healthy fund balance. And we have positioned ourselves very well to confront this COVID-19 pandemic. More so than probably 90% of the school districts surrounding us. However, based on the revenue projections and everything associated with the COVID-19, the unemployment, businesses possibly closing their doors, Monroeville Mall, etc., we have to make some financial decisions, which I know are difficult. None of us truly enjoy, but it's important that everyone understands that we wanted to protect as best as we can the robust program of studies that we offer. As Mrs. Crump reviews these slides, which truly nothing has changed from the last time with option 1 and 2, we'll be able to discuss a little bit more in detail on how this will look. Mrs. Crump, do you have the first slide?
Again, these are just examples. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties.
Can everyone hear Mrs. Crump?
Yes.
Again, these are just examples of the slides that we did last time, just to review what our recommendations are for option 1 and option 2. We are recommending a reduction in French and Spanish, Latin, German, math is through attrition, gifted, family consumer science, and science. We're also recommending non-professionals positions of a custodian, 3 paraprofessionals, school police, and athletic and academic supplementals. If we go to option 2, that is a recommendation of a curtailment in some of our programs for kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 4th, and 6th. Those are in essence all the new positions that we created this year that we would not use going forward. We're also recommending an additional reduction in school police of 4 more people. With all of those options, that would give us a reduction in the budget of $1.877 million, which would put us in close proximity of what Mr. Schott is looking for.
Yes, if we can go back to the first slide. Thank you, Maiko. Just so the viewing public understands, the reduction from the French-Spanish position, that position technically was not even present this year. We had an employee who was
On a leave of
on a
absence.
leave of absence. So we were able to manage those classes at the high school level with the current staff that we have. So in reality, that position itself was not present at the high school. The Latin position, we do understand that we currently have students in Latin, a few students who may be interested in Latin. Currently with our Edison platform, which is online, we are able to offer Latin 1 and Latin 2. We do understand that that typically does not replicate the actual face-to-face teacher with the world language. However, we are able to currently offer the world language programming with Latin. We're currently also examining other platforms that would allow students who are in or who may be scheduled to be in Latin 3, 4, or 5 to have that option as well. Likely the same thing with German. Our platform does allow for German 1 and 2. The math position, once again, as we mentioned before, is captured through attrition. The family and consumer science, I know there's been a lot of talk about what exactly that looks like. Some questions have come in pertaining to the preschool program. There is no intent on the district's end to close or shutter the preschool program. We value that program. We understand how productive that's been with our students who may be seeking to advance themselves to perhaps elementary or secondary education. The plan, however, remains on the table for a 0.5 position if in case the state Pennsylvania Department of Education does not allow certain CDC guidelines or social distancing to occur with our preschool students and number of students within the classroom. We are hoping to have more information on this as we move through the month of June. Also within the Family Consumer Science Department, all programs and courses would be offered. The one change that will occur will be the mandated life rules or business essentials course that is in our graduation requirements, which is not mandated by PDE, to be removed from those requirements. Those individual students would still, if they choose as an elective, be able to take life rules. So hopefully that's an explanation that everyone was able to comprehend as we explain these positions. We could go to slide number 2. Micah, thank you. Currently, right now, given that on March 13th, the COVID-19 pandemic, whenever Governor Wolf shut down schools in Pennsylvania, we were on a record pace for kindergarten registration that early in the year. Currently, right now, we're sitting at 140 students. There's a lot of unknown with what's going to happen with going back to school. Currently, we do not have those answers. Registration is open. However, we're sitting there at 140 students, and we are hopeful that we will be able to get up to the 230, 240 that we've seen recently. Keep in mind that all those positions that you see listed there were one-year positions. They were not full-time teaching positions within the school district. And that is all we have at this point, Mrs. Cerrucci. Do you want to open up for some questions so we can?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer a couple of questions here.
Online.
So there's one I tried to send an answer to. I do not know how to answer this live via Zoom, so I'm just going to verbally answer it. We have a question from Mr. Sakunis. Is the $75,000 for school resource officer from Monroeville still in the budget, or has it been removed? So it wasn't 75,000. Basically, we had gone to Monroeville and offered an SRO for last year, which we were expecting to have by January, but didn't work out. And we had offered them the equivalent pay of one of our officers, which was about $50,000. And part of that money came from Senator Brewster's office, who gave us a $20,000 grant. So we are waiting for Monroeville to basically get back to us. I'm not real hopeful at this time that we might have that. But the problem is we may have to return the grant money because it was specifically for the Monroeville SRO. So I think that answers that question. There's another question from Perry about the gifted program. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how the gifted program would be affected? Do you want to take that one, Dr. Short?
Yes, currently right now, the PDE code allows for 65 students to be on a caseload for an individual gifted teacher. With the reduction of the 0.5 gifted teacher, we feel that we're able to manage the caseloads at the high school and all other levels. So we would be in compliance with the code with gifted.
So people understand there's not gifted programming isn't being cut. It's more of the oversight.
Also, I did happen to see a question. The positions from the elementary,
They were all hired as 1 year long.
they were all hired as 1 year long-term subs, and Mrs. Crump was here to verify that.
Okay, so I want to acknowledge a lot of comments that have been coming in to the school board about languages. There's been a lot of requests, obviously, to not eliminate Latin as well as German. I want to give some credit to one of our students, Peter O'Grady, who has emailed the school board, is a 9th grader, and has actually put a petition together with about 20 of his students to keep German. So I told Peter that we appreciated his input and that we are looking at a lot of options. I think I emailed him there were no promises. And I just want to clarify to everybody that none of us want to make any cuts. We don't find any pleasure in reducing any programming for our students. And we hope that if we do have to reduce some, that when the economy recovers, we may be able to bring it back. But in related to the German question or any language cut, if Latin were cut, there's another question from Mrs. Sobel that says, if your students have already started and done 2 or 3 years of a foreign language and we cut Latin or German, if they've completed 2 years, are they going to have to transfer to another foreign language, therefore preventing them from achieving mastery?
And understand, as I stated earlier, currently right now, we do know within our platform, within our Gateway Cyber Academy, that we do offer a Latin and a German 1 and 2. We are examining a Latin 3, 4, or 5, German 3, 4, or 5 online, or a combination of a hybrid to see how that would look. So we do know that this is a fluid situation. We do understand that we have students who have already matriculated through phase 1, 2, and even 3 into Latin, and we're trying to meet their needs moving forward.
There's a couple questions from various people about, do we have any information from PDE on what school is going to look like in the fall? I'm kind of consolidating a lot of questions into one, but some want to know, are we going to be in a virtual environment? Are we going to be in a part virtual environment? Are we going to have reduced class sizes? Do we have any insight yet on what it might look like?
I can honestly say to everyone that all of the options that Mrs. Cerrucci just kind of outlined have been discussed internally within the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Superintendents. We do get information almost daily from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. However, we are still awaiting Governor Wolf's overarching guidelines that he will disseminate to all public school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on how this will look. We anticipate this within probably the next 2 weeks. At that point, it will be up to the local schools, local control, to determine how it is we will function in August. We do understand that we're 12, 13 weeks away. Internally, we have been managing certain options. However, we're not really prepared to release any of those because we truly don't know what those overarching guidelines will look like. But we will be prepared as we were prepared on March 13th when school shut down.
Will there be an assistant athletic director? If so, what's the salary? No, that is
There's
no longer in the budget.
There's no assistant athletic director within the budget. The position was cut.
All right, I think we need to take a minute and talk about a tax increase. There are multiple questions about tax increases. I'll try to consolidate a lot of people's questions. Let's see, if there is a tax increase fully, will there need to be cuts to our programs? A lot of people also sending in comments saying that they would actually rather see some tax increases as opposed to cutting programs. That's come in from a few of the parents whose kids are probably going to be affected by some of the cuts that we've mentioned. And I just want to, I think it's good to talk about that for a minute because, you know, we're in this pandemic. We realize that a tax increase would help our budget, but the big concern in our community is that we have a very heavy commercial tax base, and a lot of these businesses have been closed for 3 months, and it's very hard for a lot of the board members to put an additional tax burden on businesses who've had no income. And I'm not saying it's not hard for us to do that to our residents, but our businesses are suffering very much and contribute a lot of our tax revenue. And I say they've been suffering for months, and is it the right time to do something like that? So one option that has been thrown out there and discussed is maybe a partial tax increase. Maybe instead of a 3%, maybe we do a 1.5%. So I think Paul did a good job on his slide of saying that a full tax increase brings in, what was it, 3.2 million, Paul, and a half at 675?
About 1.3 million.
1.3 million.
Sorry, 1.3 million for a full tax increase. If we did a half, 675,000. I would, and related to this discussion too, Mr. Schott, can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
As we're talking about tax increase and utilization of fund balance, I think a lot of us are talking about sharing the load. This is a big load to share. How do we share the load across the board so one group of people isn't suffering more than others? I want you to talk a little bit to the public about our income sources, because a lot of people are like, well, can't we just generate more income? The majority of our income is real estate tax revenue. Can you highlight on I've seen your slide in the past, but highlight on how we get our income, and then talk about why it's not a good idea to utilize a lot of fund balance to balance a budget. And in that discussion, can you highlight the conversation we had about tax flow issues with the new rule of the tax deadline being pushed back to the end of December?
Sure.
And if I could just add to Mr. Schott's plate, Mrs. Cerrucci, I think it's also important that our public hear how we've been able to sustain the operations of the school district through the pandemic while paying employees and paying bus companies and drivers, and why we're doing that.
Sure. And you want just to even start with that comment again, as I'd mentioned, back in April, there is definitely no windfall by any means to the district as a result of this current pandemic. I know a lot of people think, well, you know, different aspects aren't happening. But again, the district was required per school code and also per Act 13 to continue to pay all district employees. And again, as we know, with salaries and benefits being approximately 70% of the budget and being forced, in a sense, required to continue those payments, again, there was no savings from that. Likewise, we did have some slightly reduced transportation costs in order for us to maintain and to have that service available, which from the growth standpoint, about 18% savings. So, you know, it's not like, you know, we had complete savings over the remaining X number of days that we're able to have those funds to utilize. Now, granted, there's some other smaller areas of savings as well, but Again, we really won't know where some of those end up until we conclude the fiscal year. We record all known payables for the year, all revenues for the year. But as far as getting back to revenues in particular, one of the things currently we're dealing with, and again in terms of local tax revenues, about 67% of our budget comes from local tax revenue. I think about 26% from state revenues, 3% from federal. So even as far as our current receipts of those, particularly earned income taxes, mercantile taxes, probably two of the bigger ones, the extension from the April 15th to July 15th, basically giving all taxpayers an extra several months, 3 months, in order to pay their final amounts due for the 2019 tax year. Again, that has affected some of our cash flow as well, where normally by now we would have received a lion's share of both of those taxes, and we wouldn't have a really good idea of where we stand with those in relation to prior years and various projections that were budgeted for the current year. And again, that makes it also likewise difficult moving forward. Again, not knowing, will we be in the same ballpark as those previously budgeted and projected amounts? And again, not knowing, or all those businesses coming back here in the community that would be able to pay those taxes. Again, that's some of the difficulty we've been dealing with that. So that makes the process definitely more difficult when you don't have a solid handle in terms of some of those revenues. As fortunately as I said before, the state was able to get their budget done, and that helped to know exactly what that meant with the level funding of some of those larger line items. So again, we didn't have that out there as we did the last time we met to review the budget. So, I mean, that was a positive. And which is one of the things as well, as we move towards the end of June, a lot of things do come into focus, and we do constantly update expenditures and revenues, and whatever the case may be. Sometimes we go up, sometimes we go down, just based on the exact circumstances. And again, we try to make this budget as accurate as possible, and again, as a tool to run this district as well moving forward. And if you could, I know that was a lot you had mentioned before, Mrs. Succi. Was there a certain other area you wanted me to talk about that I haven't maybe hit upon already? I can get into a little more.
I'm typing some questions as you're talking to. Did you mention about not a good idea to utilize the fund balance to balance the budget because next year we're going to have the same expenses?
Sure, we can talk about that. Yeah, and in terms of fund balance, and again, matter of fact, I'm going to pull the slide up here while we're talking. Let's go back to this here. And again, composition of projected fund balance. And again, as you can see, the three categories: unassigned, non-spendable, committed. Out of the 8.3 million, the non-spendable is exactly what it is. It's non-spendable. It just represents the offsetting balance sheet of prepaid expenditures the district has. So really, when you look at that full 8.3 million, there's roughly about 7.2 million that's actually available for expenditure. In terms of fund balance, what you don't want to do is to utilize fund balance to pay for reoccurring expenditures each and every year. You will run that amount down, whatever it may happen to be, in this case, $8.3 million, down to zero in a very quick period of time. So for instance, let's find the amount. The deficit, the $1,294,000, if you plug that amount and say, okay, we're going to take that entire amount out of fund balance. Well, what that means is that when we begin the 21-22 budget, before we do anything to the budget, we're already at a loss of $1,294,000 before we touch anything in the budget. And again, that's a problem. There's no doubt about that. We've been very strategic in the past by expending fund balance for either items that are non-reoccurring each fiscal year, or maybe that reoccur every maybe 5 years. Sometimes maybe you might not have to spend them for another 30 years in terms of capital projects, some various pieces of technology we've purchased. But again, we've been very strategic in utilizing that. That's helped to not only get projects done, provide items to our students, but again, help us manage our finances in a very strategic manner for that. But again,
An example would be, Mr. Schott, over the years, roofs that need immediate repair.
correct. Things of a nature that we've been very fortunate enough that we were able to lean on fund balance as opposed to taking out any new bond issues to pay for some of these smaller projects. But again, critical projects, building envelope projects where we're protecting our buildings, making sure we're not having water leaks, and those types of items that keep a healthy, secure environment for our students and all of our staff as well.
Can I ask a question? I'm just reading. I don't know if you saw it yet, or Mary Beth or not, but Mr. Sample's asking the 22 academic supplements that are being cut, and Heather Beige is asking about the 7 athletic supplements being cut. Is there any way anybody could answer those?
Mrs. Crum, do you have the list of proposed?
And again, we're still reviewing all of these. This is what we currently have at this time.
Okay, as I read through this. These would be department chair positions, not necessarily the curriculum coordinator positions. The physical education, gifted, library, K-4 elementary STEAM, advisor art club, chess club, computer club, drama club, environmental club, FBLA, freshman class, sophomore class, ski club, video graphic specialists, which is open and has been open along with the video club. We do have a football position, cheerleading, 1 basketball, 1 wrestling, a baseball, a track, and a lacrosse. These are all assistant coaches positions. Again, we were able to consult with the building level principals, looked historically at numbers for each and every one of those that we have listed pertaining to the clubs and activities, and those are proposed at this point.
I need to clarify something because I got a couple people commenting to me. Because I asked Paul to explain the usage of fund balance does not mean that I'm opposed to using any of it to balance our budget. I am okay with using somewhere in the range, for me personally, of $500,000 to $1 million, but no more than that for the reasons that Paul described. One, because our payroll for 1 month was, what is it, Trish, $2.5 million? Was that 2 weeks?
Trish is going through 3 binders at this time, so.
I have it, I'll tell you. But, and the whole fact that whatever we don't replace now, we have to replace next year. So I just wanted people to really understand. A lot of people look at our fund balance, so you have $8 million fund balance, what's the problem? Well, we're gonna need some of that for cash flow to make payroll when our tax revenue doesn't come in July. We need to save that for true emergencies, like when the roof leaks or we have a crisis. It's generally a bad idea to use your fund balance to balance your budget. Yes, I agree with all of you that this is unprecedented, and me personally, I'm okay with using some of it to help balance the budget. I think that's why we have it. So I just want to be clear, because I'm getting all these emails saying, what do you mean? Don't you think we should use fund balance? No, that's not what I'm saying. I just wanted Paul to kind of reinforce where we are and what's a good uses of that and how to use our money wisely.
And understand that what Mr. Schott has presented is clearly a projection of revenue based off of information that he is receiving from the state, the business organization, PASBO, in terms of reduction in revenue. Now, he has made that prediction. However, we don't know which way it will go. It could be worse or it could be better. We all understand that. However, we must be able to position ourselves as a district to ensure that if it is worse, we do have the rainy day fund balance in order to compensate for additional losses that clearly we weren't able to project.
Mr. Sean, another question.
Mhm.
The budgets for each department, were they cut or were they asked to be cut, and were they cut?
Every department was cut. We made lots of cuts throughout the entire process.
Is it showing in the budget with what you have?
Yes. Yes, the updated amounts that were presented this evening, those represent all of any cuts. And there have been some additions in certain areas, but the entire net process is represented by that.
And it's important to understand that when we say line item by line item, a taxing episode where, you know, all of us were all hands on deck. We complimented our principals in understanding the nature of where we're at as a district, but seriously, line item by line item, we went through this.
And just to jump in, we do utilize zero-based budgeting, and we have utilized zero-based budgeting. So again, all those budgets are built up and all that detail is shown for that. You know, I mentioned before about various documents on the website. Those documents and the detail that's out there as of May 21st, that has changed. And I even had said that evening that we were all, even the last evening we met, that we had already started making changes as well to get to where we are, to get to the $1,294,000 deficit that where it currently sits. So again, a considerable amount of review and adjustments have been made since then.
Okay, I can't find Rabbi Simon's question, but I'm going to assume, is this about the social workers and the guidance counselors? Reverend Gallagher, did you see it? Is that?
Yeah, that's what she posted.
Yes.
Okay, somehow.
It's in the Q&A down at the bottom, not in the chat. I can read it for you if you want.
Yeah,
From
read
there.
it. Oh, here it is. I got it. The Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium's community arm, the community network, had sent a letter advocating for our most vulnerable neighbors, specifically not cutting social worker position. While any cuts are difficult, I will add my own voice. Tax increases are difficult as well. It seems that the unassigned fund balance is just for this purpose, if not for the entire shortfall, at least a substantial part. Okay, I think I addressed some of that with the fund balance, but I also want to let you know that when the board kind of discussed different options, we've had lots of phone conversations about these budgets and stuff. Nobody was in favor of that nuclear option 3 of getting rid of counselors or social workers.
That is why
I think that's off the table.
it is not present tonight within the slides.
Say that again, Bill.
That is why the option 3 is not present
Right.
on the slide.
That was our nuclear option, and we were like, no, that's too nuclear. I think we're pretty much 100% consensus on that. Any board members want to chime in while I look at these questions? Okay, Paul,
Yes.
here's one for you. If there was a partial tax increase, would this decrease the amount projected to be used from the fund balance and not necessarily change any of the cuts? I'm referencing the slide shown if there was a full 3% increase. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes, as far as where it sits with the option 1 and option 2 cuts, A partial tax increase, say of 1.5% as opposed to 3%, that would merely reduce the $1,294,000 of the deficit. So that would reduce the amount to be taken out of the district's fund balance.
So we would still have to utilize fund balance. I think she's asking, would that eliminate the cuts? She's asking
No,
exactly,
it would not.
because right now we're still at a shortfall.
Correct.
Yeah, can I just ask the question of why that would be the case? Why couldn't we still pull the same amount from the fund balance and lessen the furloughs?
And you're correct, Reverend Gallagher, that yes, that, and I was about to say this, that is an option, and the board has that discretion, meaning that this could be a combination of any of three options. The proposed staff reductions, curtailment of programs that you've seen in option 1 and 2, tax increase up to the full amount or less, combination of fund balance. So all three of those options are in play. However, we must net it out to equal the balanced budget by June 30th.
Paul, are you able to put that slide up, or are we on Trisha's screen now? That slide that
We're on my screen. I have all these items.
Get back to that slide that shows where we are with the shortfall as of right now. I think that would help again to look at that.
That one right there? Or do you want to see, hang on a minute.
No.
How about the very beginning?
Yeah. The
That one right
income
there.
expense with the shortfall. Yeah. Yes. Net proposed final budget shortfall or deficit is 1.2 million. So the question right now for the public is, how are we going to make up that 1.2 million right there? Are we going to use 1.2 million of our fund balance? Are we going to use part of our fund balance and a partial real estate tax? Or are we going to do a full real estate tax? Or do we want to change something, add it back a class or something? But I think the only way to do that is to go with a full tax increase, and I need some public input, I guess. Any other board members want to comment?
Mary Beth, this is John. I'll throw some uncertainty into this. Oh boy. Okay. So I've been trying my level best to follow the governors and the General Assemblies and the school nurses and the Pennsylvania School Board Association's musings about all of these difficult decisions that are out there. And of course, no one has solid answers for us. So there are two ways to approach this. One is to be conservative on the side of saying, let's do everything we can to keep the kids safe by hiring school nurses, retaining the school nurses, making sure the social services folks are there, getting new equipment, techniques, measuring devices to keep the students safe, extra hand washing protocols, you know, whatever we need to keep the kids safe so that when the kids go back to their homes, they don't inadvertently carry something home and infect grandma and grandpa, which would cause a huge burden on the folks at home in case one of them had, you know, to go to the hospital and suffer. Okay. The other side of it is to be aggressive on the conservative on the other side of it and have the kids go to school knowing that kids will pass the diseases back and forth and develop what people have been calling a herd immunity. The theory there is that the best you can do is delay the onset of the next wave as it begins to occur. And so since the school board and the school administrations and the General Assembly and the governor don't have magic crystal balls, it comes down to try to step through this the best we can and react as quickly as we can if something begins to go terribly wrong. So let's say a school district in Erie begins to have the schools, the children go back and all of a sudden there's a big outbreak in Erie or Philadelphia or Allentown or something like that. Then the rest of the school districts can quickly react and do something a little differently. have the kids revert to home-based learning very quickly. But if we have the kids go back to school and everything's okay, then we can begin to inch forward a week at a time, a month at a time, and sort of tiptoe through this. So the long and short of it is right now, we're trying to keep our eye on what the federal government might bring to the table. Well, they're not quite sure either, but there are certain grants out there that they're beginning to make available for social services or telehealth, telemedicine, other programs that we might be able to get some money in order to, and that's why I'm bringing all this up in such a tortured way. We're $1.2 million, $1.8 million short. We might be able to get a little help from the federal government as they begin to inch forward and try to provide some sort of relief to us. So that's not a very solid or good answer, but the long and short of it is we're keeping our eyes open. And so, Mary Beth, if we propose to raise taxes completely, in order to cover the 1.2, or halfway, or take it all out of the fund balance, I think we could readjust later as things begin to change, because my guess is that they very well might change later on. So that's a second alternative to this. That is, take a bold step forward, and we'll either be right or wrong, and adjust. And not be trapped in not taking a step forward. So does that make sense?
Yes. We have a question about if we do our next meeting in person, will we have an option for people who don't feel safe or can't come out to participate? Probably a Micah question, but I think.
Sorry, I was checking the.
Did you hear my question, Mr. Brown?
I did not hear the complete question. Can you repeat it?
If we start meeting in person after June 5th, will we be able to have an option for people who can't be there to continue to contribute?
Yes, we will make available a modified question submission process. So we can get questions in real time to you and to the rest of the board.
Bill, I think all the questions are answered right now. Woo!
We've tried to address
But that's
every
pretty
question that we could. We've tried to explain the rationale of what we're dealing with. It's truly unprecedented. So many things up in the air, and it's fluid. And you see the work that we've done internally here at Central to get it where we're at with that 1.294 million. We do have the meeting on the 9th, which is next Tuesday, and also on June 30th, which is the deadline to pass the budget for our regular board meeting. So we will have more information on the 9th about going live with restrictions and where it will be held at. Make sure that we advertise that and get the information out to the public.
And Mary Beth, before we jump away from tonight's call,
I do have another question, so I'm not ready to go yet.
yeah, you just put up on the screen how people might be able to best get in touch with us. Some sort of a telephone, voicemail, an email bucket that we could collect information, like sort of a survey set of information, so that the board can get it early and digest it before next week's meeting.
I would use our school board email address. That covers all of us and the superintendent.
Right, so let's say out loud what that school board email address is.
It is GSD, Gateway School District, GSD_schoolboard@gatewayk12.org.
Thank you.
So there is a question, Mr. Schott. Is there an occupational tax for employees that live outside of the district? I think that's what it was.
It's called the local services tax. Yes. We shared that with the municipality. The district receives half of that amount, $26.
Okay.
And just to tack on to that real quick, I just, we're talking about in regards to the tax increase, just so everybody understands that the gravity attached to that, if you tax our personally our local taxes, it doesn't seem big. But one of the things that I think we're all wrestling around with is any type of tax increase, and that which we don't know yet if we're going to do it. I'm not advocating for or against either, just so people understand that that could be the catalyst that pushes a lot of these businesses out of business, that right now they're struggling to stay afloat. And the majority of our tax income is from our businesses here in Monroeville. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in there so everybody understands the gravity of that decision. That, I mean, we could possibly be talking about running more businesses out, which would require another tax increase. I just wanted to get my 2 cents in on that.
It's a good 2 cents, Paul. I like
Well,
that.
thank you.
Dr. Short, when you were talking about administrative cuts and how lean we've become over the years, did you say anything about the role of our 2 assistant superintendents? I don't think you.
I did not. They are covering a much more broader perspective than what a traditional assistant superintendent covers. In years past, we've had a curriculum coordinator, the most recently being Dr. Nancy Hines, currently superintendent at Penn Hills. Upon her leaving, we were able to consolidate that position between the 2 superintendents. Also understand we had a director of data, who at that time was Brian Stanford. We were able to eliminate that position. He's currently down at the intermediate unit. I don't like using names, but I do think it's important that the public realizes that even administratively, we have 1 administrative assistant for 3, myself and the 2 assistant superintendents. Also, we had Mr. Barlack, who was down at Mosside Middle School as an assistant principal, and we bumped him up at the high school, and understanding that we were looking at the project coming to fruition here within a couple of years, holding off on hiring that position. We did have it within the initial budget for this year, and we eliminated that. So currently right now in the building, right here where I'm at, the 5-6 building, we have 1 principal. Currently over at Gateway Middle School, we have 2 principals. So cuts have been made. Clearly we're a shell of ourselves from what we were 7 to 10 years ago.
And I just want to say I've had that question particularly, why do we have 2 assistant superintendents? And I was on the school board when we hired them, and we were looking for a curriculum director and an assistant superintendent at that time. And when their resumes came in, they were phenomenal candidates who both had experience in both. And that's why we actually changed the job description and went that way, because we had such fine candidates in Dr. Rossi and Dr. Jakey, and one had experience at elementary level and one at secondary. So I just really wanted to emphasize that those 2 men wear a lot of hats and have done a phenomenal job. And we didn't even mention that Dr. Jakey is also wearing an equity director hat on top of the securities position. He has the curriculum for secondary ed and the assistant superintendent role.
And understand 5 years ago, school security wasn't even an issue. It was an afterthought, and equity as well. So those 2 are very broad, and we've added those to his job description.
If I could actually just jump in regards to the local services tax, I did err. I actually have my information in front of me now, but out of the $52 collected, the district only receives $5 out of $52. Again, not half, as I misspoke before, $5 out of $52. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Board member questions?
I see another question popped up about, wait, maybe you answered that. I was reading it. Something about, did you talk about administration? Never mind, you did. Move on.
Okay.
Could you explain, if you are cutting 4 police positions, how that's going to work in the schools?
Dr. Chakey, are you with us?
Dr. Chakey or Mrs. Crump?
Yeah, I'm here. We talked about this, and the way it's going to work out is it's not going to be eliminations of personnel. It's an opportunity here to look at the schedule and get creative around that and be able to spread the officers that we currently have in different areas of the district.
So it's basically going to come down to a reduction in hours, correct?
Yeah, reduction of hours, not staff.
They would still be, as what you're saying, as many as we have here. How many total do we have right now?
At this point, we have 11.
Now we have actually 8 that are working on a day-to-day basis. And when I spoke with Mr. Key today, Officer Key today, we looked at the schedule and he is very comfortable with the recommendation based on the current schedule that he has been running for the last 6 months. So we have run it past him. He believes it's a workable schedule.
So there will be, are you saying going from full-time to part-time? Or just hour changes?
It's just hour changes. No one is exactly technically full-time. They've just been working more hours. Some equated to full-time hours, but it wasn't on a weekly basis. So it's reflected in their weekly schedules.
So there would be presence at every school?
As it currently is represented right now, yes.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Mrs. Crump, I have a question for you. Not to
Yes.
put you on the spot, but I've been doing some quick math.
Oh, Lord.
Oh boy, I know, right? So if I'm right, if you were employed as a teacher here prior to 2002, you only teach 5 classes a day. Is that right?
Yes, per the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, so that equates to about 3 hours and 45 minutes of teaching in front of students times, right?
I do not
Yeah.
have that information available at my fingertips, but
It's right. It's right.
Class. How many minutes is a class?
45 minutes?
42 at the high school.
42 times 5.
So it's less than 3 hours and 45 minutes. Is there a
250
way
minutes.
that they can pick up an extra class?
there is an option in the collective bargaining agreement that does allow them to pick up 6 periods when needed. That's usually worked out with the principal and the staff.
Okay, then I had one other question. Again, if my math is right here, I think I'm right. So if a teacher misses a day and another teacher covers that class, we pay them $65 to cover one class?
It's roughly $61.
$61, okay.
That's not exact, but it's roughly in that area.
All right. Wow, so, okay, on the spot. Do you know what that would come to at about a year?
Only because we did budgeting, it roughly averages between 130 to 150,000. This year before we closed, we were at 130. Last year we spent about 150,000.
Right. Then there's no way to cover that in a different way that would save money? Like, I mean, that's a lot of money to cover for 42 minutes.
We're open to any suggestions.
Well, you could probably hire somebody for a whole lot less than that, and they could cover open classes throughout the day, couldn't they?
Yes, the problem is, and it's not only here at Gateway, is the availability of subs. Few and far between. You can't find them. We were able to go with Kelly Services. We do the best we can. However, there are always times whenever there may be a call off where it's not staffed at that time with an available sub that we do have to draw upon our teachers to utilize their preparation periods.
Gotcha.
Is there also a question of logistics? I mean, how could a teacher teaching at one elementary school jump to a different elementary school to pick up the next period. It can't be done, I mean, logistically. So there's got to be some sort of load
Yeah,
level.
and we would not cross buildings with the need of a sub. It's important that we have had subs who we designate for the buildings, who are there, who do cover immediately whenever there's an absence. However, once they're used and absentee increases, it's difficult to find available subs to bring in.
Gotcha. Boy, that's a tough one. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Can I ask something?
Yes, sir, Mr. Galtman.
Going back to the foreign languages, I mean, I know this is anything we've displayed here is not set in stone. We've got an entire month to figure out what we're doing. So I understand we're doing a lot of working on, but my question is, I mean, you offer a lot of online classes only up to level 2. If I remember, the requirements for language is 3 years. So 2 years of online is not going to fulfill that. So I don't know how somebody would want to take a language knowing there's only 2 years of it and then it's going to be stuck. And also, one of the benefits of staying in language past level 3 is you can gain the college credits, which is huge. I mean, if you think about it, at Gateway, you take a language, you're there 5 days a week. When you go into college, you are now reducing from 5 to anywhere between 2 and 3 days and having to cram what our students have learned with a whole year's worth into about 3-4 months, only meeting 2 to 3 times a day. So whatever we do with the language, how can we allow students the opportunity to gain the college credits for the language?
If you're talking about an AP course,
yeah.
The plan is that we're looking at a platform that would be able to offer at this point in time an online level 3, 4, or as you say with the AP level 5 to ensure that an AP offering would be available.
All right, so I'm just a little worried with the difficulty of doing language online. I've actually had a couple friends whose children take the online courses, and granted it was due to the virus here, so it's kind of quick, but the difficulty in doing an online course compared to in person is, it's incredibly hard. I mean, if you even do online, how would it be done so that the student is not having a hard time and be almost on par, with in person? Because you got to speak the language, and you can't really speak to it in a computer.
And I concur with you, Mr. Gottman. I mean, truly, in an ideal world, you want to have that face-to-face interaction, especially with the languages. It's something that we're currently investigating, understanding that we do have some time here to get some more concrete answers on how that platform would look, and we would be able to have that information by next week.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm answering a question. Anybody else?
Good meeting, Erica. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation. If I'm just checking the questions. I think we've hit pretty much everything. Yep, I think we're good. I would guess I would seek a motion to adjourn unless there's any more board member questions.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Clary, second by
Scotty.
Mr. Williams. Thank you, Scotty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we're adjourned. Look forward to your feedback, everyone. Thanks for your participation tonight.